Success is in my DNA. When one door closes, I go sit down to be interviewed by Carlos King. Hey everybody, welcome to my channel. I am Rafael and I am here to discuss the interview between Carlos King and the one and only NeNe Leakes herself. So he broke down this whole entire interview into two different parts, both of them being about an hour long. I watched both of them from beginning to end. The second part, or the interview specifically, had me rolling my eyes the whole entire time from beginning all the way to the very end. Unfortunately, simply because of NeNe and this whole delusional state of mind that she has going on, this whole I'm the victim, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not taking accountability for my actions or anything else. And her also being a hater towards everybody else on the Real Housewives who's not NeNe Leakes herself. She starts off by discussing the lawsuit that she has with NBC, Bravo, Andy, whoever. She can't really get into too much detail because it's still an open case. And it reminded me of that one reunion with Erica Jane where she kept telling Andy, we're on appeal. We're on appeal. It's still an open case. We're on appeal. Like, she refused to talk about it, but she did say that she feels some unwanted treatment, some unfair treatment from Bravo or whoever, towards her and the whole entire cast. She also lets us know that she's in a group chat, or she used to be in a group chat, because I'm pretty sure that they kicked her out of that too, that her and the rest of the cast of the Real Housewives of Atlanta have discussed many times that they're being treated unfairly, but she never went into detail of what that unfair treatment is. And I feel like it probably has to do with the racial bias between how they treat the white housewives versus the black housewives, because the white housewives, they could get away with anything. They could throw a drink, smash glasses, throw a drink in your face, pull each other's hair, push Andy down to the floor to his seat, and all of that is called iconic, a moment, a memorable. Oh, it's such a good episode. Let the black housewives do the same exact thing. All of a sudden, oh, we need a bunch of warnings before the episode airs. We don't condone violence. We don't do this. This is not what the network is about. And then it's a whole moment at the reunion. She goes on to say that Bethany could get away with saying whatever about Andy, Bravo, the network, exposing all their secrets, and nobody's ever going to say anything simply because she's white. And I do agree with that, even though at the same time, Bethany is just so fucking annoying as well. Like, every single time I see her, it's always against my will. Like, she's always popping up on TikTok talking about the Real Housewives, the Real Housewives, the Real Housewives. So she's also just as bitter and jealous that she's not on the show anymore for whatever reason that she has. But she also dropped an interesting comment by saying when they were slowly trying to phase her off the show, she went from 20 episodes down to 6. And she didn't understand why when they brought on different women onto the show of different complexion, which I'm assuming she means skin complexion, it wasn't fair that they got 20 full episodes unlike her, who got 6. And that right there had me thinking, so wait, so does NeNe also think that there's a colorism issue on the Real Housewives of Atlanta, or does she mean something else? Because for the most part in Atlanta, unless I really have to think about every specific cast member from beginning to now, everybody has been the same complexion, maybe off just by a little bit for the most part. I mean, obviously not Kim. Kim is white, Kim feels she's light skinned. And again, I really have to remember everybody specifically, but I don't know. I mean, what does everybody else think about that? Because when she said that, it kind of threw me off. I'm like, oh, okay. So she also thinks that that's an issue here. Obviously that's an issue on Potomac. Carlos then asked her, if Andy is watching right now, what would you say to him? And you cannot tell me that she wasn't trying to be nice, nasty with her answer. She looks at the camera and she's like, oh, well, Andy, hey, I heard that you just had a baby girl. I know that you always wanted to be a father. So, congratulations, Buttercup. You cannot tell me that she wasn't trying to be a little shady towards him with that comment. And then she says that she wishes that her and Andy could be back in a better place. And I'm thinking, for what, NeNe? You accuse this man of being racist, of doing this, and this. You're suing him. You have an open lawsuit against him in Bravo and NBC or whoever. And now you want to be in a better place with him? For what? So you could be back on the Real Housewives? Like, no, NeNe, it doesn't work like that. And I'm not even trying to defend Andy either, because Andy, the only reason we as the audience even tolerate him is because he's the host of the show and he's there. That's the only reason why. Other than that, I'm pretty sure that we could all just move on from him and continue on with the Real Housewives with a different host. But NeNe, for you to say that, that's just, it's so sad. It's really, really sad, because you yourself, you said it years ago. I said what I said, and now you said what you said, but now you're going against it just because you want to be back on Bravo. And it kills me when Carlos asked her, so, would you ever want to be back on the Real Housewives of Atlanta? And NeNe Again, NeNe, as much as I love you, you are so full of shit because she says, me personally, no, I wouldn't. For me personally, no. But the fans constantly ask for me. So for the fans, I would do that. And I'm like, since when? Since when do the fans run your life all of a sudden, NeNe? Like, absolutely not. Such a bullshit answer. Because why? Because her ego and her pride won't let her admit to Carlos, oh yeah, I want to go back. It's my choice. I want to go back because I miss those Bravo checks. That's what the real answer is. But she doesn't. She's too prideful to admit that. And I'm glad that Carlos. I mean, even though throughout this whole entire video, this entire interview, it seemed like he was kind of kissing her ass a little bit, but I'm glad that he asked her, so it's not for the Bravo check? And NeNe, of course, she's gonna lie. Nobody's ever gonna admit that, like, oh yeah. So she said, no, it's not the Bravo check. I would just go back for the fans. Okay, NeNe, whatever. So then this interview continues spiraling out of control because then Carlos, he tells her, do you watch the current cast of The Real Housewives of Atlanta? And NeNe, again, full of BS, to me personally, because anytime an ex-housewife, right, is asked this question, it's always the same PR answer. No, I have too many things going on in my life. I'm so busy, I'm not watching it. I don't have time. I watch little clips here and there from what I've seen. Please, bullshit. And that's exactly what NeNe was given because NeNe said, oh, I watch little clips here and there, but I really don't know who's on the cast. But throughout the whole entire interview, she contradicts herself because, later on in the interview, they're talking about something and she starts dropping little details about the show, this current cast, that only a viewer of the show would actually know. Like, for example, she'll be sitting with Carlos and she'll be like, yeah, I watched this one clip or whatever about one of the girls with 5 medals. I don't know her name, but she has a sister named Shari, a mom and dad. She has like 500 people living in her house. Her husband name is Ross. They have one son by the name of Deuce. But I don't really watch the show. But she knows every single detail about her or the whole entire show, but she doesn't watch. Okay, NeNe, delusional, convince yourself. And she goes on to say, no, I don't watch it. So then Carlos, he pushes it a little bit more by saying, do you think in this whole entire cast of Sanya, Candy, Marlo, Moneta, whoever, do you think that there's any stars on this cast? And NeNe, she says, no. I mean, when it comes to Moneta, okay. When it comes to Sanya, okay. But then when it comes to Kenya, now you're pushing it, NeNe, because how can anybody say that Kenya is not a star? Like, that is crazy to me. That's how I know she's just saying that because she's a hater. Because if we're not talking about NeNe and how she's the queen and how she's the star, she's not gonna, shine light to anybody else. Like, it's always gonna be somewhat of a dig to any other housewives, especially Kenya. Now, it's not until now that Kenya is kind of, unfortunately, she's following in NeNe's footsteps and she's doing the whole, oh, I don't want to talk. I don't want to give you a moment. I'm looking this way. I really don't feel like it, blah, blah, blah. She's unfortunately going down the same direction and hopefully it's not the same outcome, but we'll see. NeNe gives off the same energy as somebody who peaked in high school and cannot let it go. They always have to bring up high school or bring up the good old days to make themselves feel better about themselves. And I just wish that if NeNe has something going on now, a different hobby, a different show, a different something, I promise you this whole interview will be completely different. She probably would have told Carlos, well, the Real Housewives, it was a nice moment in my life. I said what I said. It was a nice moment in my life in the past. I'm no longer there. I want to talk about my future, what's the word? Endeavors? My future events and my future hobbies that I'm working on. But since she doesn't, all she could do is just unfortunately rekindle everything from the past. And it sucks to see because I just feel like NeNe deserves so much more, but I just don't know where things went wrong. Yes, I do. It went wrong on the show during what, season 7, season 8 or whatever, her head just became way too big for her own self. And I'm not saying that you have to put yourself down or have low self-esteem. No, if you have this, or if you feel like you're the baddest bitch, okay. But at the same time with NeNe, she just felt like she was just way too good for the show. She felt like she was way too good for the cast. Like, oh, at every reunion, it'll always be her sitting in the first chair like this. Just looking away. And people seem to forget, they want the NeNe. They want the old NeNe. But we had NeNe up to what? Season 12, season 11, 10, whatever. And she was miserable. And the fact that she says in this interview, oh, I don't know why the producers thought I was miserable and they wanted me to get off the show. NeNe, we all saw that you were miserable. You did not want to film with anybody. Same thing with Kenya. That's currently happening to her. She doesn't want to film with anybody. She doesn't want to give a moment to Moneta. No, not Moneta. She's struggling to get a moment herself. No, but she doesn't want to give a moment to, what's her name? To Courtney or to Marlo. And again, she's following in your footsteps. And you were miserable those last couple of seasons. You did not want to be on the show. You were too good for anything because you thought that Hollywood was going to come knocking on your door. And they did. But then they were like, okay, we don't want you anymore. And that's that. And now we're here, unfortunately. And speaking of, I wonder how dumb Sonia feels now. Because Sonia, she was on the same podcast with Carlos, and she told Carlos, my dream cast for next season will be me, NeNe, Phaedra, Portia, etc., etc. And now look, NeNe doesn't even acknowledge you or doesn't even know who you are. So you really think that NeNe would have gave you the time of day next season? No. Now, this is where I do agree with NeNe, because she says that if Marlo is the most entertaining on the show, then we have a problem. And to me personally, yeah, Marlo has been the most entertaining this season. Like, I get that people do not like her for X, Y, and Z reasons, but take Marlo out the equation, right? Like, take her out this entire season, and what are we watching? We're just going to be watching them sit around looking at paint dry because there's not going to be much going on. Marlo has brought the funniness and the confessional, the fashion, like even her own moments just by herself with Scott Lee, or just, she could be sitting in a kitchen. And to me, she's funny. Like, she's hilarious TV. Again, whether you like her or disagree with her actions or her words, she is hilarious. And without her, I don't think that we'll have much going on this season. Candy, we barely see what's going on in her life. Kenya, she doesn't want to be bothered. And everybody else? Anyway, so that's that. And then the whole conversation about Sheree being an anchor. Yeah, I've definitely been seeing Sheree struggle. Like, she's been desperately trying to, round up everybody. Like, okay, everybody, let's get together. Let's go to the next scene. Let's go from A to B, from B to C. I've definitely seen Sheree struggle doing that this entire season. But again, it just seems that nobody on the cast wants to go along with it. Like, no, we don't want to do that. We kind of just want to be over here. Like, we want to show up to film, but we don't want to interact with each other. Also, one thing about NeNe and her comments towards Candy, how the cameras don't love Candy and they love her family. And unfortunately, I love Candy and I love, everything that she represents and Escape and everything in her music. But I think it's true at this point, not before. But I feel like now, we have seen Candy kind of come in full circle with her entire life, and there's not much else to show. Like, there's nothing else to show of her life that we haven't seen already. And I feel like people only love Candy on the show when she's getting into a fight with somebody else. The redhead Candy comes out. That's the only reason why people like seeing her scenes. If she's fighting against somebody else, if she's screaming at somebody else, or if Mama Joyce is going at it with Todd. And even that is kind of becoming tiring. So I could see what NeNe means by that, unfortunately. But it's not just Candy, though. It's the entire cast, unfortunately, with how NeNe said, I think it's time that the production team tells everybody, look, it's been nice, but, goodbye. And then, have new fresh blood come on to the next season, like a whole reboot. Maybe just keep Drew and Marlo. I love Marlo. I don't care. Keep them for next season and build a friend group around them who's actually genuine, not just a bunch of random strangers like, oh, hey, you want to be on the show? You're Kenya's new best friend. Like, it doesn't work that way. NeNe also explains that she feels blackballed. Every time they try to give her an opportunity for TV, for this project, for a podcast, they always snatch it away from her 2 seconds later. And that's really unfortunate because NeNe, again, she should be doing a million different things on TV and movies and this, that, and the third. Yet we never see of her unless she's walking around somewhere and paparazzi's asking her, do you want to be back on the Real Housewives? That's all we ever hear of NeNe, talking about the Real Housewives, the Real Housewives, the Real Housewives. And it sucks. And then she goes on to talk about her relationship with Wendy Williams. They were friends at one point, but they kind of fell out. Wendy was being a little shady, with her and saying, oh, she's that girl over there. And NeNe didn't like that. Carlos didn't like that. And this was news to me that NeNe, she was supposed to have her own talk show, but I'm not sure why she was going to have a co-host of Tom Arnold of all people. And what's sad about that is that Bethany managed to get her own talk show before NeNe could. Like, out of all people, Bethany? I mean, I've never watched her on The Real Housewives of New York. I don't need to watch any clip with Bethany to know that she doesn't even come close to who NeNe is for her to get her own talk show. Like, what? And I'm pretty sure that it was canceled, right? Like, it never really went nowhere after like a couple of episodes. And yet she managed to get her own talk show. Like, that is crazy. So in that aspect, yes, I could believe that NeNe is blackballed to some capacity. I mean, the last thing I saw her on was College Hill, but other than that, She hasn't been on anything else, no podcast, nothing. And just this interview alone, even though I was rolling my eyes for most of it, NeNe does have her moments where I could still see the spark, the spark from season 1, 2, season 3, NeNe, I could still see it in her. She still has her moments, and I'm pretty sure as soon as she managed to, dig a burial for the Real Housewives, put it in there and bury it and move on, I'm pretty sure she'll be much happier and more at peace instead of living in the past and constantly looking for Andy or Bravo to accept her back in their good graces or whatever. So then Carlos wants to play a game with her. Who do you think is a star and who do you think is starless? And the first victim up is Giselle from Potomac. NeNe, of course, she says no. And NeNe, she must have some type of thing going on with Giselle and Robin. She really does not like them. But she's like, yeah, no, she's not a star to me. And NeNe and everybody else who does not like Giselle, I am so sorry to break it to you, but Giselle, unfortunately, she is a star. She is a star, regardless whether she gets dragged every other reunion, every other episode, every other season, and, she has terrible things that she does on her show. She is a star, it is what it is. And then we go to Robin. Now, Robin, I'm so sorry. You have to defend yourself with that one. NeNe, she says no, and I mean, unfortunately, I'm sorry, Robin, but I have to agree. You and your hats are not a star. You're kind of just there. But Robin, she took to Instagram and she posted on her story, I believe. She said, well, I know that I'm not a star. That is crazy. But Robin, again, she's not afraid to admit that. She's like, I'm not a star. I'm just on this reality TV show as a regular person, and that's that. Moving on, why am I a part of this conversation? So, okay, kudos to Robin. And then I believe she goes to Kenya. NeNe gave this whole monologue just to basically say no, but yes, but no. She just could not give Kenya, her 100% yes. She was just like, yeah, she's kind of like a star. She says that Candy is not a star. And then I believe they start talking about Claudia and that whole situation with her in Puerto Rico. And we finally get NeNe to admit that, yes, Claudia was, challenging her in that whole fight, even though NeNe says she won in that whole argument. To me, I say it was otherwise. I say that Claudia won because simply NeNe was getting out of character. NeNe was getting all flustered and everything at that table, and Claudia, she was keeping her composure. She kept up with NeNe, and NeNe just couldn't say anything back to her until she kind of lost control. And she said, oh, money couldn't buy you a new pussy, now could it? And that's when I knew that NeNe lost the whole battle, and then she started turning around, and that whole situation itself. But she gives her kudos to Claudia, that's that. She said that she fought for Claudia to come back next season and to get a peach that season as well, which I believe is true. So, kudos to NeNe. And then she makes it about herself again by saying, I wish that the cast could fight for me. I wish that they fought for me, coming back to this show or keeping me on the show for better treatment. And I'm like, but weren't you on Watch What Happens Live with Andy telling him that Cynthia should be fired? So what's that about? Okay, so then Carlos. Next thing you know, Carlos, he starts getting emotional and he starts crying. And, this is what I was talking about. Carlos, even though he keeps my focus the whole interview, he makes me cringe sometimes because he starts crying and he was just like, NeNe, I just wish that, you could go to lunch with Andy for 6 hours and order yourself, a nice salad and everything could be okay between both of you again. Because I really do feel like both you and Andy could be in a better place and you're the queen of reality TV, And I'm like, oh, Carlos, please. Do they give Emmys for YouTube? NeNe, she's just looking at him like, no, I completely understand. And then she manages to force out one tiny tear and they have a moment or whatever. They start talking about Tammy Roman, which that also brings me back to I wish that NeNe could transition into the next period of her life the way Tammy did with Basketball Wives. We don't see Tammy, at least I don't, talking about Basketball Wives every other weekend or being asked about it. She has her own thing on VH1 now, and she does her own things, unlike NeNe, who, again, she's clinging on to the past with the Real Housewives. But again, that maybe has to do with, her being blackballed. That also, unfortunately, happened, I guess, but that was that. And then I believe, the other thing too, NeNe, we'll end it with this. How she claims that the Real Housewives of Atlanta is basically Destiny's Child, right? And she's the Beyoncé of the group. And without Beyoncé, they're not Destiny's Child. Now, NeNe, okay, I kind of understand what you're implying, but we don't see Beyonce talking shit about Michelle or Kelly every other interview or throwing shade at somebody like that. We don't see her doing that. So the fact that you're trying to compare yourself to Beyonce, especially now that Beyonce's on her tour, which I still have to make a video about that because, whoo, the iconicness. But that was crazy. You know, she's really up her ass, but I believe they also mentioned about how Kim Kardashian, how she should be bigger than Kim Kardashian. And, you know, I don't know about that. You know, I'm not a fan of Kim Kardashian or her family or whatever. But, you know, to me, NeNe's, you know, bigger in my eyes just because, you know, I've been watching her from the beginning. Kim, she's just there. But I don't know. That's just two different situations because Kim was on E Network, and E Network, I believe that they're bigger than Bravo. So, and then we have her mom and everything. And then Kim, I believe she was also around celebrities all her life, right? I'm not sure. Somebody needs to do a breakdown of that. But I don't know. I feel like personally, I agree with what Carlos said that NeNe deserves her own star on the Walk of Fame. To me personally, because everybody uses NeNe's, you know, her catchphrases. You know, I said what I said is my favorite. They always use her gifs, her pictures, her reactions, her everything. Like even from like season 1 all the way to season 2, 3, they still use it now. What 10, 15 years later. So I don't know. That could also be debatable. What do you all think? Do you think that Kim K do you think that NeNe should be bigger than Kim K or vice versa? What do we all think? And then we also leave it off with how Carlos said, oh, would you ever do Love and Marriage Atlanta? You know, Atlanta version of his show. She says, well, I'm not really married or in a relationship, but maybe. And I don't know. I don't know, Carlos. I feel like you're up to something, and I feel like we're going to get a commercial near in the future at the end of the year. Like, oh, by the way, NeNe's going to be on this show. But I also didn't like, again, NeNe with herself. She was just like, oh, you know, if you are going to put me on a show, don't put me with other starless celebrities who you picked up from a different show and put on your show, Carlos. AKA Monique Samuels from Potomac, you know, because she transitioned from Potomac to now Love and Marriage, or at least she was for one season. And I'm like, really, NeNe? Like, you couldn't just end the whole thing on a good note. You just had to be shady one more time to Monique of all people. Like, what did she do to you? But again, it's everybody's issue. It's never NeNe. She's never gonna own up to anything, right? It's everybody's issue, and she's the perfect one. But all right, so we'll leave it at that. Let me know what you all thought about this whole entire interview. Do you want to see NeNe back on a different show, on the Real Housewives of Atlanta? Like, do you think that if she was to come back for next season, right? Season 16, you know, would it be successful? Will we get bored of her? Would she want to interact with the cast? Who knows? But let me know what you all thought about this whole entire interview down in the comments. Bye, everybody. Mwah.